Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of PR Explored. Thanks so much for being here today. PR Explored is a video podcast where we delve into trends and topics related to public relations. I'm your host, Michelle Garrett. I'm a public relations consultant and writer. And today we are talking about burnout in the fields of PR and social media marketing. And I am very pleased to welcome my guest today, Dr. Breanne Mertz. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Um, Breanne is an assistant professor of marketing at the University of Tampa. She has extensively researched social media marketer burnout, and she was kind enough to spend some time with me today to help shed some light on this important topic. And I want to also just thank Karen Freeberg for connecting us. So,
Yes.
um, welcome, Bree.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored. And yes, I echo what you said about Karen. She's amazing. I look up to her in so many ways. And if you haven't watched that episode, you should. It's a good one.
That was a very good episode. I love that conversation, and I'm sure this conversation is
Likewise.
going to be so helpful as well. So, first of all, as everyone kind of gathers and gets settled for this, I wanted you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, and I will share some links so that people can learn more about you as well as you tell us about yourself.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Well, thank you again. I'm so glad to be here. I am excited for you to share some of the links in case people want to reach out or have questions. I am very much in the camp of being collaborative and working. Anybody in this space who's interested, it's always fun to talk about what's being done because I think that we're kind of on the forefront of some really important research and it's an important topic that impacts a lot of people. So yeah, I'm very passionate about this space and grateful to be able to share a little bit more about it. I always like to say when people ask me, like, what do you research? What are you into? Obviously, my doctorate is in marketing, but I have a background on a doctoral level in quantitative analysis and psychology as well. Before that, it was management and working in higher education. My undergrad's in management, and have worked in like higher ed and marketing before I went the academic route. But um, I now, for the past 5 years, have taught social media marketing and then buyer behavior. So, that kind of mashup of psychology and marketing together and understanding why people do what they do. So, a lot of my students that I am putting out, if you will, into the workforce are going into roles where they're social media heavy, digitally based. And so it definitely is tied to that from a pedagogy standpoint. And then from a research standpoint, I always like to say my research really just focuses in on anything that impacts the well-being of individuals. That's like at the very top. I always describe it as an umbrella. So and really that's the only thing that would interest me in research a lot of times, like how does this impact the well-being of people? And so I've looked at that in my role as a marketing professor in kind of three spheres, if you will. So under that umbrella of the well-being of the individual, I've looked at it
Mhm.
in vulnerable populations. So that's one we're not going to talk about today, but vulnerable people groups, so modern
Mhm.
slavery, human trafficking interventions, things like that. Secondly, has been consumer well-being. So in that space, looking at the impact of social media on consumer well-being, and that's a really fascinating one because, of course, I'm a consumer of social media as well. Like I love it on a personal level. I consult in it. I do social media and digital marketing consulting as well, and have since 2020. So I've worked in it, and then I teach it, and then I research in it. So though I will be making some statements about social media and kind of this dark side of it, if you will, I also know it's not going away at any point, and obviously, it's an incredible tool as well. There's just kind of things to be aware of. So there's research in that sphere, and then thirdly, how it impacts employees, and that's kind of more where this paper that we're going to kind of be discussing some of those findings, some of those implications, will focus more in on. How does social media usage impact you professionally? If you are in
Mhm.
PR, if you're in comms, if you're a social media marketer, um, and you're heavily working with social media, what is the impact on you? What are those implications? And then what can you do about it to empower you and to help, hopefully, one of the big goals of our research, it's not just mine, I have incredible co authors. What can we be doing to empower each other empower our students. Depending on who I'm talking to in this audience, you may be the educator, you may be the practitioner, you may be the student, the individual. Like, there really are implications across the board, no matter what your role is. So all of it is very much, if you have a smartphone, if you have social media, like the stuff we're going to talk about today totally will apply to you, which is, I think, really, really incredible.
Yeah, I think, as we were preparing for today, I noticed, some of the things that we're going to talk about apply to me as a person, in addition to me as a professional, because one of my goals is to stop spending so much time online, on social. I mean,
Yeah,
it just gets in your head. I don't always think it's a great, um, thing for us, for our mental health in general. So,
right.
and then when we're working in this field, in these fields that are very related, I feel PR and social media marketing, there's some overlap, a lot of things we share in common.
Yeah,
I feel like that just compounds that, because you do feel like you need to know what's going on. And if you're out of the loop, it's tough for you to help your clients and jump on
right.
trends and all that stuff. So I feel like this applies, really to every person, but we are going to kind of hone in on how it impacts those who work in, I would say, social media marketing, public relations, communications, all
Yes,
of that. So, I
right.
mean,
Absolutely.
somebody has just already commented, deleting Instagram, Twitter, Facebook is 100% better.
Oh, sometimes I do think we would be a lot happier and our well-being would be much more improved if we could just have never been on social media in the first place. I would agree. However, if you are in this space, you know that, it's not super realistic to completely disconnect, though maybe little digital detoxes could be something that benefits you. So, yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. That's absolutely true. So, well, I thank you for sharing a little bit about your background.
of
We are
course.
going to kind of jump in here. We're gonna set the stage. We have a lot to talk about, and I do welcome questions, and I'm sure Bree welcomes questions as
I do.
well, and we
Yeah,
will do our best. We probably won't save those to the end, so if you have a question that's relevant to what we're talking about at the moment, go ahead and post it, and we
yeah.
will do our best to address it, when we, as soon as we can. So,
Sounds good.
and if there are questions you have that you don't feel comfortable asking, I'm sure Bree would welcome, a DM or something too. So, that's also, available, I'm sure, for you. But just to set the stage a little bit, we know, we were just talking about, social media isn't going away. Of course, usage continues to grow. You cite a number in your, research: 4.9 billion global social media users spending,
Yeah.
approximately 2.5 hours on average on social media platforms a day. And I think that's, a staggering number.
I agree. I agree. And honestly, that is one of the things that stopped me in my tracks early on in my doctoral program. Just wondering, wow, am I really spending that much time? And then what does that look like over a lifetime? Just a little fun fact for you: the global life expectancy of individuals is technically 73. In the US, it's a little bit different. Women, it is 79, men, it's 77. But let's just go off of the 73 number globally. Any guesses on what the average amount of time is in years that you would be spending on your life on your phone during your lifetime? Any guesses, Michelle? I think I might have given you the answer ahead
I
of time.
knew, I knew, I knew kind
Does
of,
anyone in the chat want to maybe throw in a guess? Because this was shocking to me. Um, all right. I
it's
like to
not
look at it in
great.
the context of a pie. No, it's not great. It's essentially one third of our lives right now being spent digitally on a device. And then of those, 21 years ish, over
Mhm,
21 years,
mhm.
7 of those years are spent on social media, which I think is really crazy. And that's for the average user. Now, if you're obviously a professional in this space, we'd have to do the math on that, but it would be much higher, right?
Yeah.
So, as far as just sheer consumption and usage, it is, as much as we're sleeping, because you sleep another third of your life, right? So then that leaves one third of maybe free time, or no, that would be work, right? Like that is then a lot of that is your work, your 9 to 5 or whatever that looks like for you. So it is there's a substantial, my point is, there's a very substantial amount of time going to that. So let's check in with that. Let's see how that's impacting us. Let's explore it. And that was kind of the impetus of what really threw me into this work, and noticing some of the impacts for myself, from just a user in a vulnerable population group, because especially young females are more susceptible to some of these more negative ramifications. And I was
Mhm.
experiencing a lot of those. And yet at the same time, I was teaching them and I was consulting in them, or using these platforms. And all I had heard from the literature in marketing and comms was, it's a great strategy. Social media is a great strategy. It can help you make money. It's a great channel to leverage, which is true. But there's also the impact that it has on our well-being. And there was a gap in the literature there. And so I'm really hoping that that starts to close and we start to empower each other in this space, in practice and in research.
Yeah, no, that's what I say. It's a concern. I think it should be a concern for just about everybody. And of course, as a parent, I also have young adults who are I think they're aware of how much time they're spending, and they're even trying to kind of move away from some of that. So I think we all just need to be kind of aware of it. And I think some of your numbers are really highlighting, and how because people are probably kind of brush it aside. Oh, well,
Sure.
I'm sure it's not that much. But then when you look at it like that, it is quite astounding, actually. So,
Yeah.
um, of course, now you were talking about, how the growth of social media and social media marketing, and the jobs are growing as well, right? So,
They are.
um, and as we see more people working in the field, of course, the burnout rates are also, going up. And I know working in PR, there are multiple studies and articles and surveys about how stressed out, we are as well. So I think there are a lot of things that kind of dovetail here. But I want to kind of dig into that a little bit,
Yeah.
um, and talk about some of the reasons why burnout in these fields is so high. So let's kind of dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, to your point, there are more jobs now than ever, and that's simply following the money in the marketplace. As far as the projected, and I've got a stat here, 247.3 billion to be spent on 2027 by 2027 on social media, just in advertising alone, right?
Mhm,
And so, of course, with that, these social media marketing and PR related jobs are at an all-time high, and so we see
mhm,
that. But the paradox here that's so interesting, and I'm kind of pulling from the notes of a study that my colleagues and I are actually on the third round review of. But the paradox is that social media marketers, and I'll use that term, but blanketing in all of the roles that fall within that,
mhm,
42% intend to leave their positions within 2 years, which I think is staggering. So that's really high.
mhm.
20% intend to leave the marketing industry altogether. And
Ooh,
so while we were doing this research, we were like, why is this? I mean, it almost sounds like the nurses in the pandemic, in the medical industry, when
mhm,
they were just getting so burned out that there was just these incredibly high rates of turnover. And so we were trying to kind of understand this more, and we kind of started with looking at um, some of the detrimental impacts that social media has just as a personal user, not even as an employee, but what are some of those ramifications that are associated with social media usage, high social media usage. And a lot of them are related to, your mental health, and it can detract from that. So decreased well-being, increased anxiety, decreased self-esteem, body dissatisfaction, compromised mental health. There's a lot of these
mhm,
things that are pretty serious just on a um, personal usage level. And then when we look at that in the professional context, we are seeing, these higher levels of exhaustion, and this negative impact on just work performance in general. So
mhm.
screen time alone, just these increased amounts of time, or this increased amount of time on screens, can contribute to increased job burnout and mental health issues. And we see that in the literature. So then what do we do about that? And that's your role. That's something that is required when you're in this space. You have to be on personally a lot of times, but then also professionally. And we were finding that there really wasn't a whole lot out there, at least academically, um, in the
Mhm.
literature. And so our study really was trying to kind of explore and highlight the experiences of social media marketers and looking at what are some institutional and personal strategies that we could um, posit, if you will, to counteract some of those undesirable repercussions, right, of that
Mhm.
social media. So really with the goal of, well, we still need to have our personal and professional usage for our jobs to carry things out, but is there a state of balance that we could achieve, or what we coin social media wellness in the literature? So um, yeah, that was kind of where the beginning of this study came, and where we really started looking into this more. Um, I might have gotten a little bit derailed from the question, but I think that was kind of what you were asking, like setting the stage for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think from my perspective, I think, one of the reasons or some of the reasons are, these industries, they never sleep. It's a
Yeah,
24/7 news cycle. People are online around the clock. It's not like we have a 9 to 5 job that we can compartmentalize, show up, go home, and turn it all off. A lot of people, and I would say in PR as well, but more so in social media marketing, feel like they have to be, monitoring all the time. And even if you
absolutely.
have a team, which some are just a sole one person team or whatever, um, that's a lot of pressure. And you feel like you always have to be on. You feel like I mean, a lot of them are tasked with doing more than one job because, there's overlap in PR with social and vice versa, and then we bring in content marketing, we bring in communications, corporate
Yeah,
communications. So there's a lot of, like, responsibilities and, from a PR perspective, we have to know what's going on so we can help our clients protect their reputation and all of that, and I mean, with social media, if you drop the ball, the moment is
yeah,
over, it's gone. So there's just
right.
anxiety, stress, pressure from that perspective, I think, too.
Right. One of our respondents from our study, to your point, I mean, they said that they feel being in these roles is a recipe for burnout as they stand right now, with the
Mhm,
outlines, the parameters, the expectations, the job description in a lot of ways,
mhm,
mostly due to some of these just really intense expectations and this constant being on, this constant state of being on.
yeah,
As far as burnout goes, just defining that, I think it's always important just to kind of set the stage for, like, what are these terms? What are we defining burnout as? At least in our research, we say that social media marketer burnout is a mental and or physical exhaustion that can emerge related to the demands and limited resources within a social media marketing role. So again, Michelle, to your point, I mean, just those intense demands, those limited
mhm,
resources, kind of feeling
yep,
like you're always on, and that kind of being the perfect storm for a lot of people, where they do then end up feeling burned out. And
mhm,
from that, then turnover happens. And so I think
yeah,
it's really important to have this discussion, not just let it continue going on without
right,
any form of discussion, but what can we do about that as individuals? What agency do we have in our lives and in our roles? And then
mhm.
also as leaders and educators, how can we make some improvements and put some things in place to hopefully offset some of these issues? So yeah.
Yeah. I think it's important too, this just popped into my head because it's graduation season. As people are
Yeah.
choosing, to enter the field, they should be aware, and this is not to scare anyone away, but there are
Yeah.
just pressures that come with these roles that you need to be aware of so that you can be on the lookout and kind of take care of yourself, protect yourself a little bit, look for a company and a manager that, is also gonna be, playing a role in helping you, just looking out for you, I guess. We're gonna talk about some specifics that, those in leadership roles can do to help their teams, and so forth. But anyway, that just popped into my head. It's like, well,
That's important.
it
Yeah,
seems glamorous. I know in
it
PR, and I
does.
think social media marketing too, sometimes people are like, "Whoa," it looks so glamorous and this but
Yeah,
really, you have to be and not to say it can't be fun, but I
right.
mean, and rewarding, but you do have to be aware that unlike maybe other roles, these roles are kind of I don't know if I wanna say on the front line, but I mean, definitely social media marketers are on the front line because they're,
Yeah,
interacting with everyone. So
Well
yeah.
said. Well said. I would totally agree. I think you should always look at two sides of the coin, you know, in any scenario, always try to kind of understand something holistically, especially before you know, commit your career or your education to it. And obviously I love it. And I think it's, you know, such an incredible space to be in, an incredible field to be in. But I would be remiss if I was just to say, you know, it's all sunshine and roses and, you know, there's no hardships with it because as there is with everything in the world, you know, there's the pros and cons, right? So I think we've definitely relied very or leaned heavily on the positive sides, and we
Mhm,
haven't talked a lot about what's going on. But people have
mhm,
that kind of almost a little bit systemic in that way, where then I think there's been a lot of just quiet suffering, if you will. That might be a bit dramatic, but it's like, is this normal? Like, I was never told that this would be something I might feel or experience.
yeah,
You know, and that's where I think it's really important. And we'll talk about this more towards the end, but towards community and having resources and having
mhm,
empathy and understanding of,
mhm.
you know, yeah, community in the space. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Well, when you're younger and newer to your profession, I think, you're learning about, what is expected, what's normal, learning about balance, and you wouldn't
yeah,
necessarily recognize or understand, that you could be at risk for burnout or,
right.
whatever. So that's I think it's great to have these conversations and just make people aware that, again, not to scare anyone. I never like to couch it in those terms because I know a lot of, like, tactics with the media are to scare people into
Right.
reading or
We're not
scare
fear
people into.
mongering. It's
No, no,
showing the
we're
whole
not doing
picture.
that.
So,
No, we
yeah.
just want people to be aware so they can protect themselves and take care of themselves. Because that's really, I think, if we're looking out for ourselves, taking care of ourselves, that's all we can do really, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, oh gosh, my next question is too long for me to post it. Let me see if
No, that's
I'll
okay.
read it.
But
One goal of your study was to help those who work in social media marketing develop strategies to counteract the undesirable repercussions so they can achieve better balance. That's what we were just kind of leading into there. So you coined the
yes.
term social media wellness, and let's just talk about that a little bit. And I'll see
Yeah.
if I can edit this so it fits on the screen while we talk.
Yeah, no, gladly. So if you're familiar with this space, you may have heard the term digital well-being, which is kind of a big umbrella term for essentially the ability to stay mentally and emotionally balanced while being constantly digitally connected, right, and communicating digitally. And so our definition that was just published in 2024 kind of falls underneath that. So social media wellness, the technical definition is the optimum state of well-being that a consumer is pursuing while intentionally managing social media consumption, accessible on mobile devices and other digital technology, through the awareness of how much such consumption affects one's mental health, well-being, and priorities. So really the emphasis here, there's kind of some like academic jargon in that, but the
Mhm,
emphasis is on awareness and intentionality. So checking in with yourself on an individual level and asking yourself, you know, how is my social media usage impacting my values, my well-being,
mhm,
my mental health? You know, is it in line? Is it serving me in those areas, or is it detracting? And there's not going to be a one size fits all answer, formulaic, you know, formula that I can give you and say, okay, plug and play just like this, and then you'll be social medially well. You know, it doesn't work like that.
right,
But I think it's super important for us to have that awareness and that reflection, and then from there make some smart goals, and make some
mhm.
tangible potentially changes to how we're using things if it's not in line with those things that are important to us, our, you know, our values, our priorities, and our mental health. So
I
that's
mean,
kind of the emphasis of social media wellness. And of course, that's something that we could all benefit from, right? No matter what
yeah,
our role is, even just as an individual consumer using social media. Because I don't know about you, but I have definitely gone down the rabbit hole of scrolling through TikTok videos for 2, 3 hours. And then I come up for air and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I just, you know, those 2 hours, was that how I wanted to spend my time? Was that in line with my values? Absolutely not. Do I feel good after spending time in that way? No. You know, like there
no,
were other priorities that I had that opportunity cost
mhm,
wise, you know, it was not in line. And it's not to say you can't scroll on TikTok for a while, but
mhm,
again, having those moments of checking in, because day by day, if I was to use social media in that way, unbridled and unchecked, at the end of my life, I'm looking back and I'm like, I spent 7 years, scrolling through stuff in a way that was not how I actually wanted to live my life and what I actually wanted to do with my time. And so I'm
Right.
hoping that, with some of this awareness, we can
Yeah.
realign ourselves, in a way that we can be more proud of and flourish in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think the awareness is always the first step, right? And then
Yeah.
being more intentional. I think that word's a little overused, but that was kind of my word for
Yeah.
this year was I wanted to be a little bit more
Yeah.
intentional
It's a
with
good
my
word.
time professionally and personally and just across the board. So I feel like we
Yeah.
just, we're making choices, whether we really recognize that always as we sit and scroll. But we absolutely are making choices. So
1000%. Inaction is action. That's a decision, every whatever as time passes, like whatever you're doing, that's a decision. So yeah, no, I love the word intentional.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's, borderline. I've seen it a little bit too much, but I think it's perfect for my where I'm at because I just, it's just too easy to get in your groove and your mode and just do your thing. And that works sometimes, but we should always be stepping back occasionally and just looking at it like, are we really, is this the right way for us to be, spending our time and approaching these situations? People
Yeah.
are enjoying the discussion, I see. Thank you,
Oh,
Michelle,
good.
for
Yeah. I
saying.
see another Michelle. Yes. Thank you, Michelle.
And if people
Hi.
have questions, again, we're happy to address.
Yeah.
Uh, so the next thing that, I wanna talk about is, what can managers do
Yeah.
to help the situation, help their team, maybe help create an environment, or support system, or, let's just talk about that a little bit.
I would love to. I would love to. Do you mind if I mention personal strategies first and then managers? Does that matter? Or the order? I could say managers first because
No,
there's
it doesn't.
definitely
No,
strategies
I think
individually too.
yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay, okay. I'm referencing a few of my because I've got lots of resources. And again, if anyone has questions or if they want certain resources, I'm happy to share. I know Michelle's gonna be sharing like Google Scholar and LinkedIn and things like that. And some of the articles that were just recently published with my awesome co-authors and I actually do talk about a lot of these implications. We actually have like a whole table of resources in the macro marketing one, so that can be helpful. But yeah, as far as just small little tips and tricks or practical technology recommendations for an individual, time blocking is one that can be really, really impactful because, um, you know, though we may think that in this space we're good at multitasking is not actually something that is beneficial. And I think social media, a lot of times, is used in a way where it is very heavily, you're looking at this and then you get distracted by something else and then you pop over to that. And maybe you're still trying to write up a report for your social media marketing strategy and you're doing lots of things at once. Or if you're just using it as an individual, a lot of us are watching TV and then we have our phones as well, or maybe we're trying to like write a report or do something in our personal lives and then we get pinged and there's a notification from social media. So um, to the extent that you can, it is very beneficial to try to time block, make times and spaces where you're like, okay, this is when I'm going to check social media, this is when I'm going to be on my screen. If I am going to be doing something on my screen or on social media digitally, that you are all in on that, and then all of your other notifications are turned off. I do have some interesting stats related to this whole idea of multitasking that I think are totally relevant to our conversation. Um, the brain can't actually do two tasks at once. It's rapidly switching. So it is continually draining our cognitive energy. And if you try to multitask, you're actually reducing your productivity by 40%, according to American Psychology Association. So that was fascinating to me because back in the day, I always used to say, like, I'm such a good multitasker, and I kind of wore that as a badge of honor. And I thought that that was a good thing, but it's really not. So we have this illusion that we feel like we're doing more, but you're actually increasing mental fatigue, your errors, your tasks are
Mhm.
taking 2 times as long. It's increasing distraction, decreasing performance, and then ultimately, detracting from your ability to do whatever you're trying to do. So, time blocking, that's important. Even just a small little notification can throw you off. One last stat I'll give on this that I think is really impressive. or not impressive, but just enlightening for me. It takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to regain deep focus after being distracted by your phone or any interruption.
Mm-hmm.
So studies show that even just hearing a phone notification or having a ding go off without you even checking it can cause
Mm-hmm.
a drop in attention and task performance. So
Yeah.
that's, that's so, I think, important to remember, not only on a personal level, but if you're a teacher, an educator, this is why we tell our students, like, hey, no phones, or turn off the messenger to where you're not getting text on your,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
text up on your Mac or whatever. So, yeah, time blocking would be one, turning off notifications, trying to disconnect from your screen in intentional ways. So, back to the time blocking discussion, having blocks of time where you're on, and on the times that you're off, making sure that that off time is in line with what you're actually wanting to do. How are you filling your cup? I like to say, is that calling a friend or a family member? Is it exercising, spending time with your
Mm-hmm.
kids, playing a hobby? I love Breanne Brown's emphasis on play. Um, there are other little tips and tricks like going grayscale. You can actually, on your iPhone, make everything go to black and white. So it's a little less visually appealing and visually involving. So there's been research on that.
Mm-hmm.
You can add a screen time widget. So if you're familiar with the psychology literature and the importance of feedback loops, or the impact that feedback loops can have,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can help you to kind of be checked by yourself of like, oh, I've spent 5 hours today already, like on, whatever. Is
Mm-hmm.
that in line with what I want or not? And so having that loop of being presented with the amount of time that you're spending and checking in with yourself in that way, just having that kind of level of accountability. Now, I know a lot of us have probably, and Michelle, tell me if you've done this. Have you set up screen time limits on certain apps? Because I have, and then I blow through them and I say ignore. And I'm the girl
Yeah.
that talks about social media wellness. So, it's sometimes easier said than done,
Yeah.
but still having some of those things in place. So those are a few kind of practical things. Value
Yeah.
adds or value recommendations. No phones in the bedroom or while driving. Obviously, while driving.
I see that
Tried
way too much now, the
so
driving.
bad.
I
It's
do.
so
I'm.
bad. Yeah,
That's
no, I know.
dangerous.
Engaging in meditation and mindfulness practices. So I think it's really good to check in and have those moments of reflection, maybe even if it's 5 minutes and you're setting your intentions for the day, or setting some goals, or maybe it's at the end of the day where you're checking in again and saying, did I live out today in a way that I wanted to, that filled my cup, that was in line with my priorities and my values.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and checking in with yourself in that way. I have my students do reflection activities where they actually have to reflect on how social media usage made them feel, and whether it was good or bad, and breaking that down. And then if it was in a bad way, like what would they want to change? So, anyways, and part of that is taking stock of what are your responsibilities, your values, and priorities. And so we kind
Mm-hmm.
of go into that as well. And that takes a little bit of reflection and some time,
Mm-hmm.
some
Mm-hmm.
introspection, which I think is important. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, that's kind of on a personal level, but we can kind of shift. I know
Yeah.
we need to shift to the
Oh
managerial
no.
ones as well.
We have time, but I just wanted to to say a couple of things. I think
Yeah.
it's good to develop hobbies away from technology, right? So, like, I took
Yes.
up knitting. That's just an example. My
I love
daughter
that.
convinced me to give that a try, so it gets me
Yes.
off
What have
the
you
phone.
made? Have
But
you made anything?
I have made some things.
Okay.
I have made some things, but mostly it's just something else to do. With my hands, that it engages your
Yeah.
brain too, and it's been a good way for me in the evening not to be sitting with the phone, with
Yes.
the TV on with the phone. And I've even seen like they're developing programs for people to have on with their, I mean, like that they're doing that with that in mind. Like people are going to have their phone while they're like watching the show. And I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
surprised, but not
No.
great. And
Well,
then,
it's giving consumers maybe what they want, but probably not what they actually need,
oh,
in that way.
nobody does that anymore, really. I mean, let's
Yeah.
be honest. Yeah, if there's a buck to be made, they'll do it, whether it's
Yeah.
good for consumers or not,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But you were talking about also, being interrupted, and I was thinking about a study I saw about Slack, people using Slack at work, and how
Yeah.
that's just a constant, like, stream of interruptions, and you get off task. I mean, you can't I don't know how people, do that without, like, having, like, set times when they're gonna be, have, engage in Slack interaction, because that would just drive me crazy.
Well, and I mean, we're programmed to be kind of vulnerable to that in a way, like that, the FOMO and
Yeah.
the fear of missing out and wanting to kind of be in the know, it's really counterintuitive and it's tricky, especially when, well, and shifting kind of from a personal level to a professional level, if those are the parameters in which you're expected to perform, and that's where things get
Mhm.
really challenging. If the way that things are set up are for you to be always on, and the expectation is for you to answer the DMs within 20 minutes,
Mhm.
then that gets really challenging. And that's where I think we have to shift into more of educating and maybe public policy, maybe leaning into that space. I have managerial implications, public policy implications with our work, but or we do, not just me. Again, amazing co-authors. But
Yeah.
yeah, because I think a lot of the things that are in place as the norms in this industry are setting people up for failure, and are detrimental to their well-being, and not even just to the well-being. Like if we're talking from just a capitalistic standpoint, people turning over is really bad for the bottom line. It takes a lot of money to onboard people and get them back up to speed and replace people.
Mhm.
So if we're
Mhm.
just taking humanity out of it and we're just talking from a numbers perspective,
Mhm.
it's really not best practice for things to continue running in the way that they are, right? And so I
No.
think that's again why it's so important to kind of shed light on this, both from a let's protect people, let's help people in their well-being,
Mhm.
but also like running a company, running a business, and operating with long-term success in mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about what managers, can do to set up an environment that, kind of sets the tone. What are some things that anybody leading a social media marketing team, or somebody leading PR, comms, any of those types of teams might think about, that would benefit their, not only their team, but themselves and their company,
Yeah.
their entity. So,
Yeah. I love that question. So I think it just based on leadership research. One of the strongest things that you can do as a leader, if you are in a managerial position, is to have empathy and to prioritize empathy. So stepping in with this um, lens of putting myself into the shoes of my employees, even if they're not in it themselves, and what are their experiences. And so, kind of leading with that, and then coupling that with this awareness of kind of what we've just talked about. So, there has to be a level of education and awareness in order for any change to take place. And
mhm,
so before, maybe there was this mindset of they should always be on. That's just part of their job. It's not that hard. They can check from, social media all hours of the night and check our DMs and answer things and put out fires and just be on at all times because they're working from home. It's a remote job. How hard can it be? You know what I mean? Like I do feel like there's kind of these norms, these narratives, if you will. And so I think having that awareness, having that education, shifting into a place of more empathy and trying to understand,
mhm,
and not even empathy. It's like it's backed by science at this point. Some of these repercussions. So I think hopefully having this evolution of industry norms and helping make those changes. So fostering kind of a more respectful work environment. Maybe a part of that is let's check in on everyone's mental health. How are we actually doing? Maybe having some surveys for your employees of how burned out are you? What is your, where are you at? Or having some conversations openly, heart to heart, one on one of be real with me. Like, where are you at? What are some of the pain points that you're experiencing? And some of this is just best practice when it comes. I know I mentioned my undergrad is in management, and then I did an MBA. So, um, yeah, leaning into some of these organizational behavior best practices, and checking in, and maybe that's bringing in a consultant. Maybe that's bringing in a team to help on a bigger scale, for smaller companies and agencies, maybe one-on-ones. And then from that, having that information, making some shifts, and that is going to take top-down leadership because obviously the employees themselves can only really control themselves and their personal usage, maybe to some extent their professional usage with time blocking. But really, when it comes to shifting the way in which the industry is working or the job expectations, that's going to take the leaders, the bosses,
mhm,
and top down. So hopefully, what we would like to encourage, again, if not in the name of helping your employees have well-being and not totally burn out, but just in the name of just sheer best business practice, and not having everyone turn over, maybe shifting some of the work expectations. And maybe that could be decreasing some workload. Maybe it's increasing staffing. Maybe you're leveraging technology and you're doing some A/B testing on technology that can help empower the employees to do things to a greater scale. Encouraging healthy boundaries, like you as the boss, as the manager, saying, hey, we want you to maybe have a mental health day a month, and you just take that and that's given in excess. We want you to disconnect in the evening. We want you to be 9 to 5. And we've hired another person to be on in the
Mhm.
evening. Or maybe we set up some automatic replies where we say to our customers, even, we value our employees' mental health, and we will respond within 24 hours. If there is an emergency, you have this helpline, and maybe have that in their DMs, like even on the social media platforms, because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, like I'm just thinking retail, makeup industry, there is this kind of expectation of like, I should get a response within
Mhm.
minutes.
Mhm.
And a lot of managers would have that expectation, but do they actually need a response like in that second? Maybe not. I mean, I think it depends. So maybe leaning into, and that's why I was talking about leveraging technology, maybe you are setting up more automatic replies
Mhm.
to answer some of those common questions. And then just thinking outside the box, like having an emergency line or something to where that employee isn't having to be on 24 hours. So
Mhm.
encouraging those healthy boundaries, both in job description and then also reprieve for the employees themselves, whether that's through days off or maybe it's a retreat every month that you give your employees like some sort of gift card to, and this is a little bit more out there. This isn't actually from our findings. I'm just kind of thinking off the top of my
Yeah.
head, but something that could encourage them to like rest, relax, rejuvenate. And then clarifying job expectations. I think that's something that is going to require a lot of back and forth between the employee and the manager as well, saying like, hey, going back to that original point of like pain points, hey, here's what I have been asked to do. Here's what I'm actually doing. Because a lot of times people in these positions wear so many hats and they are
Mhm.
doing so many things that it's hard to even put it down on paper. So having some maybe practical,
Mhm.
just put
Yep.
everything down the best you can on a spreadsheet. And then let's put that next to what your job description is right now. And then let's talk about what you're enjoying doing and what you're not. What is a stressor to you and what is life giving? And maybe make some changes as far as what they are actually expected to do. Maybe there is a whole nother role that can be pulled out of those, and they can work more efficiently and not burn out and leave in a year, and then you're again in the long run better off as the manager. So
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it was a little all over the place, but I think the flow, if I was to summarize that, would be educated on this topic, have empathy, raise awareness not just for yourself but for your team,
Mhm.
be a part of the change, healthy change, and hopefully evolving some of these organizational and industry norms. Fostering that respectful work environment where there's communication and there's back and forth on what's working, what's not, what are you doing, how can I
Mhm.
help you? Kind of this internal marketing perspective of even treating your employees with that same
Mhm.
respect and care that you would your customers. That's an important element here.
Yeah.
Maybe shifting into clarifying job expectations and making some changes there, encouraging those healthy boundaries, not only at work, but also at home,
Mhm.
and cultivating and incentivizing things that kind of back that up. Maybe leveraging technology, maybe increasing staffing in
Mhm.
order to help those employees. Um, in those ways. So I could go on and on. Clearly, it's a passion, so I could
Yeah. Well, I mean,
talk
I
about it a
think
lot. But
that's really important and it's good advice. And I think, just advocating for your team, like being, because I
yes,
think there's sometimes expectations come down from above and everyone just
sure,
kind of feels like they have to hop to. But honestly, again, I don't understand like where the disconnect is as far as like leadership understanding that, the well being of your employees impacts your bottom line. There is a direct
yes,
connection. So even if you
there
don't get
is.
the right thing to do from a human perspective, there's actually an ROI involved, as
Yes,
well. So,
yes, well said.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think this is I mean, you could sell these ideas, like, if again, I believe in empathy, and I think there's a
Yeah.
lack of it today, but
Yeah.
even if you don't necessarily believe that other people deserve that kind of treatment, there are real reasons why these things matter, and some of them
Yes.
are not that difficult. It just kind of requires, again, a little bit of awareness, maybe a little bit of a mindset shift, or I
Sure.
like
Yeah.
your point about, industry norms, like, I think we all, we have belief systems about a lot of things at work and in our personal lives, and sometimes our
Yeah.
belief systems need to change a little bit. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's
Absolutely.
very, very important and helpful. So, if the mental health and of workers and the risk of burnout aren't taken seriously, what are some of the things that may happen?
Yeah. I mean, I think you said it so well. I mean, not only could they be at risk, um, emotionally, mentally, physically, all of those repercussions that we talked about, increased anxiety, depression, loneliness. There was even like really serious things, especially for vulnerable populations. Not that the others weren't, not to minimize those, but like eating disorders, body dysmorphia, suicidal ideation. Like there's some really serious individual personal ramifications that can happen with large amounts of screen time. So if that's not enough as a manager for you to look at that and say, like, I care about that, then to your point, at least care about best business practices, which ROI, bottom line, these people are, if it stays the way that it is, they are on a track to burn out. When they burn out, you have that turnover, you have to have the cost of onboarding and bringing new people on, and
Mhm,
ultimately that's going to detract from the success of your business long term and even like um, your revenue each year. So I definitely think that it's like two prong approach could be taken. I love anytime I make a suggestion, I like to back it by research. And so hopefully even this conversation could maybe help empower some people to respectfully and maybe very diplomatically, of course. I'm not saying like let's go in and storm the castle, and say, hey, here's all the things that are wrong. But hey, like here, can you be aware of this? And then here's why. And the why not only being because of our health and well-being, but also because of the health of the business and organizational outcomes.
right. Happy, healthy employees speak well of the company, and that's one of the best forms of PR and marketing that there is,
That's right.
honestly. It
That's
attracts
right.
talent to your company, the highest levels of talent, and they
Yeah.
say good things, you get good word of mouth, and it's really, it really does really make sense. But again,
Yeah.
we do like to back it up with real numbers, and that's why I think your research is important and hopefully will help, people take it more seriously and really take a look
Yeah.
at it.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, employee advocacy is so crucial. That's a whole chapter I teach in my social media marketing class. And yeah, you want your employees to not only be healthy and happy and, contributing to the organizational outcomes, but they can be your advocates. Like they can be your influencers that actually have
Mhm.
sometimes even a larger impact than a micro, macro, mega influencer that you could be paying. Like
Yep.
the stats on that are insane. I don't think we have time to discuss that here today, but you should look that up if
I
that's
think that's a
something.
great topic. I'm gonna actually
Yeah,
make note of that because I think,
you
how you
should.
use your employees,
Yes.
we talk about using customers, of course, but, like, your employees are really important, and I have talked about HR and PR kind of, need to be a little bit closer sometimes because
Yes,
sometimes,
and not siloed.
yeah, if you have your HR, policies that are, impacting, your employees that are, they're positive, um, policies, that can really be
Yes,
something you can even talk about, as you're telling stories about your company to journalists and things like
1000%.
that. And the employees themselves will sometimes, just on their own, chime in on LinkedIn, on social media. So it just, and people that are, considering working there will look at those things. And if your company is
Yes.
being talked about in a favorable light versus, maybe an offer from another company that might
Yeah,
not be viewed so favorably, that could sway them. So I think, again, there's so many things we could talk
so many benefits. I'll add to that. I had one of the deliverables that I had my students do. With social media, we take on a client for our class, and that's how I teach everything. It's through like introducing a topic and then having them actually create something in line with that for the client. And one of those was we did the social media campaign, a social media marketer campaign, an influencer campaign, and then we also did an employee advocacy campaign. And so they had to create an entire slide deck of how the client could creatively leverage, champion the stories of their employees. And at the beginning of that, they had to back it with stats of like, what is employee advocacy? Why is it beneficial? It's beneficial to the actual employee and to the company because it's building the employee's personal brand to the extent that they're able to be a industry expert. And then for the company, obviously, there's positive things there. So that's a fun one. I could go on and on about that too, but I encourage that. That would be a great. I'm looking forward to listening to that episode already.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great idea. So thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
As we have a few more minutes, if anybody has a question, I do encourage you to ask. But let's,
Yes.
kind of as we, try to wrap things up a little bit, what else would you like those who work in these fields of social media marketing, PR, communications, and so forth to know? What other things do you think are important to leave us with today?
Yeah, sure. I love that question. I would say, well, there's a few things. I definitely will kind of rattle off a few categories, but if I was to share what I think other people who work in social media, PR and comms, what could they know? What could the big takeaways be? I would say prioritize your well-being. Your health is so important. It's one of our biggest, if not the biggest resources that we have. And so, it's also you can't do meaningful work if you're depleted, and so really leaning into that and thinking about it not only just from a again, it goes back to your personal well-being but also your well-being and optimization as a professional too. So that would be something. Embracing lifelong learning is another point I wanted to mention. Just obviously we as professionals want to be the best that we can and continually learn in our discipline, but embracing lifelong learning in the context of your health journey and well-being. So how are you caring for your physical, your emotional, your digital, your social media health, and making sure that that is, you're doing that to the extent that can really contribute to your values and your priorities. Practicing that regular reflection. Life can get so busy and it's so easy to just be moving so fast that you don't take a second to really reflect and think about what's important, or how things are impacting you positively or negatively. And so having some time, carving that out and saying, evaluating that relationship with technology and social media, making sure it's aligned with those values and goals.
Mhm.
Let's see. Hmm. I think the last thing I'll cover is just leading with empathy and building community. Whether you are a leader, whether you're in your first time role as a social media employee or a PR professional, comms professional, really wherever you are on that spectrum of tenure in your job, just being empathetic and trying to understand how people are feeling and what they're dealing with, what their pain points are, what their goals are, and just being sensitive to that, and having a community of professionals around you that you can talk with and that you can open up to. I think it's so important to have mentors in the space and be able to learn and grow from them too. So seeking out that mentorship, no matter what level you're at, um, and just continuing to learn and grow and try to be the healthiest version that you can for yourself, and then also for your company, but most importantly yourself.
Absolutely, right? Because we have to if we're not well, we just I mean, what else is there? So I always feel like, taking care of ourselves isn't really selfish. It's actually one of the smartest things that we can do for everybody, for ourselves most importantly, but also for our family, friends, our
Yeah,
employer. I mean, it benefits everyone and I know that, regularly checking in, it's not like, today you're fine, but maybe, in a couple of months, maybe something has shifted. So you need to make sure
yeah,
that you're visiting and checking in and kind of, and I think it's good to have some trusted, like, people to talk to. That might not be within your company. It might be another
Yeah.
friend in the industry, or just, just another person outside of your work entirely, that you can kind of go to and have a safe space where you can discuss, how you're feeling, or if you think there might be an issue, or somebody that knows you that can really say, look, we see some changes that were, maybe aren't so healthy, or you can
Yeah.
discuss things. But hopefully your manager will also be a person you can go to with any
Yes.
concerns. And if you're not in that kind of an environment, uh, you know, I won't say it, but maybe it might be time
There might be
to,
better opportunities. Yeah,
yeah, it
elsewhere.
might be time to look at the landscape and see if there are other options for you. So, but
Yeah.
I
Well,
wanna thank you so much, Bree, for being here. I think this was an important conversation. I think your research is very important and enlightening.
thank you.
And I hope that everybody will follow you and, look into your work and your survey. And if anybody has questions, that they would like to get in touch with you about, I'm sure you'd be happy to, entertain those. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be possible without my awesome co-authors. I wanted to give a shout out to Kelly Anderson, Dr. Haas, Kylie Pettit, and a few others that have just been so instrumental. Dr. Zmick, several of my friends, my dear friends and colleagues that we've worked on this area together now for years, and yeah, I'm just so passionate about it, and I'm so grateful for them. So it wouldn't have been possible without them. And I thank you for having me today and being willing to spend some time with me and chat on this fascinating area. So I really enjoyed myself. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bree. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks, and I will be announcing our next guest soon. And I thank everybody for spending time with us today. And take care of yourselves, and we will see you again soon. Bye.